raised bein anochim. Gershon is Gayer, Gershon is Gayer bein anochim. And he did malachas harbe. He did many malachas b'Shabbos harbe. So there's a machlokes in the Gemara. Rabbi Akiva holds it, says Yavoda. Once he'll be notified, he'll know about it. Halachas maybe chatos achas al hakohen. He brings a chatos, one chatos on all Shabbos, on all malachas. Why? Because it's only one shogig, and as well he's chayiv a korban. He's chayiv a korban. Blessed love will be chayiv a korban on al koros shabbator and every koros shabbator besides Shabbos on the achilas and iser dam achelav, and so paskins Rabbi Shmuel. However, we find that Rabbi Yochanan Shlokish in the das, this is das of Munbaz, is brought down. That's potter miklum. It's completely potter from anything, because it's right. Because we learned the Gemara says, well, shoygig kamezit. Shoygig is like a mezit. Ma mezit shoysi yediyah. There was you had a knowledge that you would af shoygig ain't a chayv elim hoysi lo yediyah. But if he never had a knowledge, so therefore he doesn't have to bring. And that's how, like I said, Rabbi Yochanan Shlokish paskin. And Rashi brings the reason to this is because it says anyone who says it's mutter, onasu is an oinus. However, Taisus argues with this. He said it's exeris hakosov, but then the Rambam paskins as well in halacha that says the Rambam paskins that's the tinik shnishba benanochi is chayiv a korban, is chayiv a korban. So this is lost in love bez shem Mashiach will come. So it's an afkamina for the chayiv chatas. However, it's a little bit negeya even bezman hazeh. Where's the negeya bezman hazeh? Because you find the Moshe Feinstein, Igros Moshe brings, he's mistapig, he has a shaila, if what's halacha if there's an isser lifnei iver leisite michshol when it comes to a tinik shenishba. Is there a problem of lifnei iver leisite michshol when it comes to a tinik shenishba? On one hand, since we see that he's chayev a korban, if you chayev a chatas al chetoi, that means say there's a chet involved. It's a geder of a chet. That means it requires a kapara. So therefore there's a problem with lifnei iver. On the other hand, since we say saif, after all, after all, he is an oinus. And if he's an oinus, then he says if he's an oinus, then there's no lifnei iver, right? So that's what Moshe it asks, and he brings it. It seems like he's noiter more to aser, and he says since this lifnei iver is also, he brings another svara. He says because lifnei iver is not only a chet which is bein adam lachaveiroi, which one is goyim because you're causing someone else to do an aveira to stumble. It's also an aveira shebein adam lamokim. And Menatoyer says, I mean, klapi shmaya is an isser to cause someone to do an aveira. So therefore, he's not a lesser. However, but it doesn't come to it doesn't conclude with affirmity about this. And he says that there's a tzad lohokol, and he says there's a tzad to be makel. Where, when it comes to halacha, if you want to give someone some to eat, let's say you have a neighbor, a fryer neighbor, they ask, can I give some shlech manas? You know that he's not going to make a bracha. He's not going to make a bracha. He says, benidin, he says to feed an adam that doesn't know to make a bracha, doesn't make a bracha. So he says it's considered, says Moshe, it's considered begeder tinik shenishba ben anochrim. It's considered like a tinik shenishba ben agoyim, and then it's brought down in the Mishnah Berurah and Simikuf Samachtes. It's brought down as well in Sif Cut and Yud Aleph. And it's a halacha in Simon, it's Kuf Samachtes, Hilchos Dvorim HaNoihagim Besuda, and he brings as well that it's also lahachil goy in Sif Yud Aleph. It says in Sif Yud Aleph, it says loy mafkina mitzvah tzedakah. There's mitzvah tzedakah to give, right? B'shvil chashash shem lo yavorach, right? Loy mafkina, you're not potter. Brings the Mishnah Berurah from mitzvah tzedakah b'shvil chashash shem lo yavorach. Except if you know for sure, he says ach. The Mishnah Berurah says in Sif Simon Kuf Samachtes. Sif Yud Aleph, if you know, im yedeba vaday shlo yavorach, also litten loy av b'tar tzedakah. But that's only, says the Mishnah Berurah, metoich rish asoy. Only metoich rishis. Avalim metoich einsoy. The Mishnah Berurah paskins she'eina yachal avarach loy nifka me mitzvah tzedakah b'shvil zeh yeshvi. One is obligated to provide him, to give him to give it tzedakah for an individual, even though he won't make a bracha. So a very interesting din. Although it's not brought down. If you look, on the side, it's not done in Shulchan Aruch, but this din of mechiyav chatas or not. Although it's a din of l'asad lavoy, but it's negei l'maisa if there's a chet or not. And this is how we pass him. This Hashem continue to next time. As Hashem with this halacha. Yashakoyach.
Thank you, Rabbi Philip. Yashakoyach as always. We'll see you again, Mirz Hashem, on Thursday. And it's okay to send things in during the week so the Olim can keep up on it, okay?
Will do, Bez Hashem. Yasher Koach.
Shkoyach, Rabbi Philip.
It's always a question as to who should introduce who. You know, I'm sure that in the Siyum HaShatz, they spend a lot of time analyzing who should introduce who. But I think somebody as chashuv as Rabbi Oppenheimer, if the Rav is here, that he should introduce him. I have my own take on why we invited Rabbi Oppenheimer, but if the Rav is here.
Yeah, I'm here. Hello, I'm here.
Yeah, we can introduce Rabbi Oppenheimer. Yeah, so go ahead. Please
Okay,
introduce
sure.
Rabbi Oppenheimer.
Sure. First of all, he's one of our Chaver Rabbanim in the city, and someone who mamish made the school Benos into a real established Beis Yankov, that everyone is clamoring to go there. You know, and Baruch Hashem, the girls are produced, and by us he's also mechut hours. You know, with the Galasis. Baruch Hashem, Talmud Chacham, and someone who cares about things in the city, does things for the city, and cares for every one of the Bnei Yankov and every one of his Kehillah. And it's a big schutz to be able to, someone in these times where the schools are closed, and we have the Menalim who are mamish so dedicated, give away their, I know how many hours Rabbi Oppenheimer puts in to be able to keep the girls going, to keep the girls, Chas v'shalom, no girl should fall. I think some girls not only didn't have a Yerida, that Aliyah now, through the special connections that they have the Manal and the teachers and the Rebbeim. Rebbeim should hope that he should have Lanachas from his Benechob, the Talmidim, Talmidos, from his Kehillah, from his own Mishpacha, and together we should be zoichet to him, to see him do the Avodah Beis Mikdash b'meir v'meinu. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you. I just want, if I can have a moment. Of course, the Rav mentioned that he's mechitten. That's really the way you get onto this show, is by being related to somebody in the Agudah, whatever the Rav said notwithstanding. But in addition to that, we had last week this chus of hearing from so many Rabbanim. Let's listen for a moment for what Rabbi Oppenheimer said. It was something close to all our hearts.
I'd like to begin by thanking a very, very dear friend and neighbor, Rabbi Rafi Lipner, for putting this beautiful evening. He just starts to dance. He starts to dance and to dance. And that way, the person on the top is able to not only stay and watch the festivities, but actually be a part of the dancing. So the Dubna Maggid explains that the same is true of every single Jewish Yom Tov. We have our neshama, and the neshama desires the Yom Tov. It yearns for every single part of the spirituality of the Yom Tov. It wants to absorb everything that the Yom Tov has to give. But the problem is there's the body. And the body has no interest. It has no interest in the spiritual journeys of the soul. So what do? We feed it. We give it food. We give it the delicacies. We feed it delicacies. And that way the body is willing to join us on our trip. It's willing to stay. It's willing to partake, so that we, the neshama, is able to absorb and to indulge in the spiritual gifts of that particular yom. And so Klal Yisrael,
Rabbi Oppenheimer, do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Well, if you certainly can speak about food right away, you'll find it close to many of our hearts. And it was very meaningful when you said it then, and certainly it's meaningful as I watched it again. So the Rav talked about how you're dealing with students at this difficult time. Describe a little bit what's been their morale and what strategies have you used to keep them engaged in learning.
Okay, so first of all, Rabbi Lowy, I have to thank you so much for the very, very kind words of introduction. Not that I'm worthy of them, but I'm very, 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 very grateful. And thank you to everyone for having me, for including me. Now I understand what I finally. I was always wondering about my mechutin and what I got from that. So now at least Baruch Hashem, the chinuch now during these times, obviously it has its challenges, but in many areas we're getting to parts of chinuch that normally we never would have even gotten to. Just by way of explanation, I've been observing over the last few months that many institutions have been stripped down to their very core essence. Lamashal, there are governments that before Corona, everybody thought that they, outside they had a facade of being very professional and very excellent. And now it's stripped down to the core, and you see the dysfunctions become very obvious. And unfortunately, this is true also of families. Families that they managed and they functioned, but now when everyone's home 24/7, suddenly they're forced to face some internal issues that never before had to be faced. And most importantly, this is true of individuals and especially teenagers. Many Talmidas who were perfectly functional and productive and successful when they had their normal structure. So now we're seeing that the signs of distress, they don't have their regular structure, and who knows what's going on in any given home, and they don't have a social life. And there are certain issues that we're seeing, and any good mechanech or mechaneches, and by the way, we really have to thank the Rabbi Shul, because Toronto, I must say, has a huge amount of exceptionally superb mechanechim and mechaneches in all of its maistas. And we really have to thank the Rabbi Shul for that. And they are on the, they're at the battle lines, and they're seeing and they're reaching out, and they really are making a difference in helping people, Talmidim and Talmidas. They're really making a difference in building them and in giving them help and finding them right in areas that normally may never have even been noticed. And so that's something very important. Plus, one of the most important things that I think we can teach any student or child is how to deal with adversity. The challenges of life. Things don't always go our way, and to be able to show them how to give zechanetza, as we say in Yiddish, and how to manage and how to roll with the punches is and how to stay motivated and how to push forward and how to be positive, how to stay optimistic, and how a person's ruach can really help him carry. Those people who have been positive, they've managed to succeed and to grow and to thrive and to flourish and to learn things that otherwise they never would have learned. So while the challenges of chinuch now are very obvious, there's also some opportunities, which, as I said, many mechanechim are Baruch Hashem utilizing for the te'eles of the Talmidim and Talmidas.
So I really have a follow-up two-part question. Number one is, you're obviously not using Zoom, and I'd like to know what the thought process was, if it was ever considered. And secondly, when you speak about the chinuch, there's a large component that isn't being accounted for, and that's social environment, girls' school. There's no color war, and there's no trips, and there's none of those team building exercises that don't exist really in yeshiva. Yeshiva, there's really a chiyuv to learn first and foremost. But in a girls' school, when that's taken out of the equation, how do you substitute for that? So firstly on the Zoom, and secondly on the social issue.
Okay, sure. So first of all, let me answer the second question first. For teenage girls, socializing is really, what do they call it, an essential service. And Baruch Hashem, the Rebbeinu Shalom gives everybody the know-how to succeed in those basic necessities. And they figured it out. They have their own phone, conferences where they get together, whether for schmoozing or for learning or to play a game. They figured out how to get around, not, of course, legally, but they figured out how to work the social distancing rules and when they can go to a park with 5 people. So Baruch Hashem, our Talmidas, I think socially it's not the same 100%, but they're managing, they're managing. And Baruch Hashem, let me segue into the other question about Zoom. The question of Zoom versus not Zoom is a very important question. Now, I'm fortunate that I work in a school which is pretty much homogeneous in the sense that almost the entire parent body is of one mindset, and they really wouldn't have wanted start to use Zoom technology. Firstly, because they don't want to bring internet into their home and so on. And many of our parents don't even have Zoom at home, and so really it was a decision that really decided for itself. Having said that, if I were the principal of a broader based school, I think it would be a very, very important question as to whether or not to use Zoom. And I think that what the question boils down to is, do you look into the short term or do you look into the long term? There's no question that using Zoom greatly would enhance a classroom setting versus doing it over the phone, where you can't see the teacher can't see the talmidas. I don't think anybody could question that. On the other hand, there's also no question that once a school approves of something internet-based and actually feeds it to their students and gives it to them and says, here, use this portion of the internet. So you're condoning the internet and you're actually promoting the internet. And as we know, the internet is very, very attractive and very appealing. And once we give our stamp of approval to it, we really don't know where it's going to lead. Will I say that most students will be fine if you tell them here it's just for Zoom? Yeah, most will. But what about the miut? We have to, right? It's a concern about the miut. What happens once the yeshiva system and the parents and the school system give a stempel on something internet-based? So it's really a question of the short term versus the long term. And a leader, whether it's a mechanech or a parent or anyone in any position, has to really, most people tend to think in terms of the short term, but I think that it behooves anyone who's in any role of leadership to think about the long term. And so I'm not in any way, chas v'shalom, criticizing any schools that have chosen to go with Zoom, because I do, I'm on Zoom now, and I definitely know that it has tremendous advantages. And I wouldn't be hypocritical as to say that if you use Zoom, you're terrible, obviously. On the other hand, I think that to start to use it in the meistus of chinuch, I think that sends a message, and you can't take back the message. You can't. It's very, very hard at the end of Rosh Hashanah when this is all over. We have the Beis Hamikdash back, and this is all over. It's very hard to claw back something that you gave an approval on, which is also very, very glamorous. So, like I said, in our school, it wasn't much of a shiloh to begin with, but I think that even for a bigger school, I think that, if it was my decision, obviously I would consult about a chinuch and so on, but I think I would tend to decide to err on the side of caution.
Thank you. Just to keep on the, I guess not quite on the Zoom topic, but has there been discussions with sharing resources with other schools? In other words, just for as an example, I know maybe you've heard of a program called Night Seder America, where they break the borders of the school. When all of a sudden there's 200 kids in a certain room, whether it's by phone or Zoom, there's more resources available at your disposal. You can reach more teachers. You can choose from a bigger curriculum or a wider curriculum. Has there been thought at all of sharing resources with other institutions?
So, for this in the past few months, pretty much I think everybody's goal, was just to get to the end of this school year. We did have some shared resources before Shavuos. Rav Shia spoke to all the Beis Yaakov girls, and that was, over the phone, and that was arranged by Rabbi Silver and myself. So we're certainly not opposed to it at all. Obviously, it would have to be possible, and it would have to be, it would have to make sense and have to work on it. So no, we didn't look into it yet. For the most part, there's been, financially, there's been a number of government grants. And so for the most part, we were able to continue our program despite the many, many challenges, because financially it was still, doable. Like you said, as you said, though, if in the future it becomes difficult for whatever reason, then we're definitely not against pooling resources. It would just have to make sense.
Well, it's simply the city, everybody is going to be in a different financial situation. Correct. Come next month, come next week. And the expectation of the school on the parent body has to be adjusted.
Right.
Right. And one of the ways you can work around it is work with another school and share and pool resources.
Sure, right? Sure. So we're definitely not in any way, opposed to it. And if it became necessary and was possible, I think it was something that we definitely would consider. As I said, in the meantime, why not? If a Rav or someone is speaking, why not? And he's on the phone. In any case, why not have everybody join and everybody be inspired?
Speaking though of your school and how they're coping, how is the I understood from Mechi that you already took in the next year for the grade 9 kids, but how is the graduating class coping? I mean, they're almost out. They sense that they're out. Are you going to graduate them?
Yeah, absolutely. The Ministry of Education is that branch of the government. They're the ones that oversee diplomas. They actually give the diplomas through the schools, and they are very, very concerned about students' rights. And they actually have made pretty strict guidelines for schools. Don't tell this to my students, by the way, about to what extent we're allowed to take marks down from after March 13th, which is when the learning begins.
I won't tell them, by the way. They don't have Zoom, so they won't see this.
Exactly. The ministry has given guidelines, as to when and if we're allowed to lower students' marks from what they've earned up until March 13th, because the government understands the hardship placed on certain students. So certainly everybody is going to get full credit for this year, despite the diminished hours and despite everything else. And yeah, we're going to have a graduation the week after next, Mirz Hashem. It's going to be done virtually over the phone. By the way, next week we're going to be having color war over the phone. We're going to be having a color war over the phone. Baruch Hashem, I have to tell you, our staff is highly, highly creative. And even without Zoom, they've managed really to pull off a tremendous amount of work. We have a system that teachers hand in all of their material on Thursday, and Sunday we make individualized packets for every student. And we have a system how they come spread out over a period of time to the driveway of the school, and we bring out individual packets. And then over the course of the week, when the teacher's on the phone, they say, okay, pull out page, this page, and then they teach us looking from the same, and then they submit them back in. It's you could be very, very, you can do a lot, over these phone systems, and you could be creative. So next week we're going to have some sort of a contest where the school will be divided up into groups of 5, and they'll be observed by different parents in their backyards, that making sure that they use social distancing rules. And that's where they're going to have a brainstorming session, and they're going to come back on the phone, and it will be if you want to be a judge on the color war, we're looking
I guess if you have color warning, it's constantly over the phones. It's the phones companies that have been benefiting from this more than anything. So maybe it should be the red of Rogers versus the blue of Bell.
How about this? How about this? The two for the teams: Pikuach Nefesh against Tefillah B'tzibur.
Okay. Or backyard minyanim versus parking lot minyanim, right? Versus porch minyanim, which really is a good segue to the next question. You're unique in that you wear 2 hats. You're Rav of the Marlee Shul. You have a very loyal kehillah. Some of them have a connection to our shul. In addition to that, you're also a mechanech. It's at times these 2 positions can conflict in that a family should, it's an opinion, should really rely on a family rav, especially at times like this. However, it seems to me that mechanchim, to a large degree, are elbowing their way and trying to dictate to a family in and above what a family rav should do. How do you manage the 2? What's your feeling about that conflict, and what's your feeling about the importance of a family rav?
So firstly, I think the most precious treasure that a Yid has is his family rav. And based on the Gemara in Makkos, the Gemara tells us that someone who stands up for a Sefer Torah but not for a Talmud Chacham, the Gemara calls him a Tipish. Having a Rav is one of the most precious commodities that a Yid and his family can have. By way of, just to segue off, today there are many, many halacha hotlines. And I think it's important to point out that these hotlines definitely serve a purpose, because not every Rav is always accessible immediately, and sometimes there are time-sensitive questions, and certainly we don't want people just saying, well, I can't reach my Rav, so I'll Google the Shaila, because if you Google a shaila, you don't know if the answer is even coming from a paisik, right? A qualified paisik. So certainly halacha hotlines have their place then, but I think that if they wanted to do an even greater service to Klal Yisrael, I think the first question they would ask when someone calls is, why aren't you calling your family Rav? Now, the person can give a good excuse. He can say, I tried him 6 times and I can't get through. He could say, I'm embarrassed to ask this particular shaila. There are legitimate excuses, but I think that if the halacha hotlines wanted to provide an even greater service, they would first make sure that the person has a good excuse, not why he's not asking the shaila to his family Rav. So having a family Rav is crucially important. And when I was growing up, I'm hearing an echo now. Is that on purpose? When I was growing up, I don't remember in the house there was ever a hava amina that we should ask a Rav other than our shul Rav. If my mother was cooking something, and let's say a shaila came up in the kitchen in kashrus, so we asked our Rav. If we couldn't get a hold of our Rav, I don't know, maybe my mother put the food away until she got a hold of him. I don't remember ever there being a havamina. Okay, let's ask a different Rav. Not because I grew up in Monsey, not because Monsey didn't have wonderful Rabbanim, they did, but the value of a family having a Rav who knows them and who knows their situation, it can't be sufficiently stressed. It can't be sufficiently stressed. A mechanech should never try and supplant that, right? As a principle, certainly there are times where we have halachic discussions in the classroom, but I'll always try at least to remember to end off by saying, but do what your mother does, right? And if you and your mother both don't know, ask your Rav. I'm not going to chas v'shalom try and take over that role. When it comes to the Marlee Shul, Baruch Hashem, it's a wonderful community, wonderful group of families, and my role there is different. Although in many ways, being a Rav and a mechanech is very, very similar. You're building kisharim, you're building connections, you're trying to help, you're looking out to see how you can help. They're both very, very rewarding jobs, careers, positions.
I would say it's more like a calling, especially since you're a kohen, all the more reason it's you're a achrayus to develop that kesher between a person and the Ribono Shel Olam. If anybody has any questions, they can certainly ask it now. Are you prepared, by the way, that if potentially in September the classrooms are not open? I think you were undergoing renovations, or you were considering undergoing renovations. What is your plan for September?
Do you mind addressing that question to Mechi? I see he's right there.
Mechi says I have to ask Rabbi Oppenheimer. That's his typical answer. No,
there's much discussion about that. I think that's everybody's worst nightmare. By the way, can I just say something? I think many parents, never appreciated schools as much as they do now. All of a sudden, right? But let me tell you a little secret. It works 2 ways. I don't think students ever appreciated school as much as they do now. Almost we get back submissions from our girls on Sundays. They return their works and their tests. Almost everyone has a packet in there. When are we starting school? I love school. I miss school. Like, these are things that you would never dream come from a student. So to all parents out there, it's a 2-way street.
Wow. I want you to know we have that same feeling about our shul, not only the school, but our shul as well. When is shul opening up? Usually while we're in shul, we're complaining and we're criticizing, but I think everybody, echad b'feh mole, will agree how much we really miss the shul and being there.
Okay, that's a major one of the few, I guess, the few major advantages. But it really all comes down just back to the school. One thing that I've seen here over and over again is that it really comes down to a person's ruach, to a person's positivity. The people who are managing and functioning and thriving and flourishing are the ones who have the good ruach. Ruach ish yechalkel machalehu beruach nechei mi yisrael pasuk mishlei. A person who has a positive spirit, you can carry him through anything. And we're seeing that people who have a good ruach and good positive attitude, there's workarounds. There's workarounds for everything, and it's the secret to life. And it's one of the opportunities that we have to teach now, which we normally don't have the opportunity to teach.
Okay, well, thank you. If anybody has any questions or want to wish Rabbi Oppenheimer well, please do so at this time. have to tell you how much I enjoyed Tuesday to see all the Rabbanim speak, even though it was somewhat of a whirlwind and everybody spoke very quickly and were involved in the just managing it and producing it. But that was one of the examples where we can share resources that probably when life was so-called normal, it wouldn't have been possible to pull off.
It was incredible. It was amazing, and the amount of people that joined in. I think it was a tremendous Kiddush Hashem. It was a tremendous Kiddush Hashem, and it was an honor to be a part of it.
Yosy?
Yes.
Yosy, are you there?
I
Go
can
ahead.
ask 2 questions.
Yes, go ahead.
Being a Rav is a full-time job. Rabbi Felder once told me that my hours are from 9 to 9, from 9 a.m. to 9 a.m. And being a principal is also a full-time job. Do you ever find those 2 responsibilities conflict, and how do you work them together?
I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate that Baruch Hashem, I have excellent, I have excellent support staff, people that help me, and Baruch Hashem, I was zeicher to a Rebbitzin that takes all the oil of the home off of me. Baruch, Baruch should continue to give a chayach. But is there ever a conflict? Sure, yeah, there are conflicts, and we balance. I'm sure, Rabbi Yosy, I'm sure you're as busy as I am. I'm more busy, and I'm sure you're as good at balancing, juggling different jobs. And somehow Shabbos comes and we rest up and then start again.
My other question: have you noticed that it used to be that the teachers taught the students, but I know with my children's teachers now they teach the whole family.
Exactly.
Because I have a chance to see to hear what's going on, and it opened my eyes up to what wonderful mechanchim we have. Did you get comments from your parents like, "Wow, I never realized this teacher was great"?
All the time. I also listen, by the way, to my children's teachers when I'm home. It's incredible. Yeah, absolutely. If we can get an appreciation for what our children's mechanchim and mechanchas do, that's also that's a tremendous taylos. Yeah.
I never thought I would want to go back to cheder again, but it's very geschmack being grade 6.
If you could do it at home. Listen, if you could have done it at home, you would have also loved it.
Now, high school math isn't so much fun. Hashem should give you a lot of atzlacha.
Amen. Thank you.
If the Rav wants to sign off, give Rabbi Oppenheimer and Bnos Beis Yaakov a tremendous bracha.
If I could just first, the Rav,
yes.
If I could just give the Rav a bracha, that the Rav and his Kehillah should have a tremendous continued hatzlacha, Solange Yaron, Gesundte Yaron, and the Agudah should go over with all the other Bate Knesiyos to Yerushalayim and Meir Yameinu. With the Rav and
all the backyards.
We really enjoyed it. I think it was very informative, and we learned a lot about you. So you're a Rebbe now for all of us also. You're and the Rebbe should give you koyach to do everything you're doing. B'shleimus gesundheit.
Amen.
Thank you. That you should be able to have koyachos together with your Rebbe and the whole family, your whole staff, and continue. Continue to flourish and be married, b'nois Yisrael. And the ikar is you should be matzliach in everything you do, in gesundheit, in Sayin Rabbanus, and Sayin in family, Sayin in the Beis Yaakov, and everything we should be zeicher together to see this beautiful kill of Toronto flourish, gesundheit, and go connect with Shekeinu, Meir B'Yameinu.
Amen. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi Oppenheimer. I know we have a busy schedule. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for the Rav, Rabbi Philip. I also have to thank the sponsors of tonight's program. It's sponsored by Shlomi and Riva Feintuch in honor of the birth of their grandson, born to Moshe and Ahuva Feintuch in Lakewood, and Leilush Nishmas, their grandfather, Moshe ben Mordechai Shlomo Feintuch, whose yahrzeit was the second day of Yontiv, Zion Sivan. Thursday, we're having Tehillim Tachnunim at the same time at 7:45. Please join us then. Wednesday's the women's shir by Rabbi Lowy at 10:30 to 11:30. And then on Friday, we moved Sounds Like Shabbos to 5:15 to 6 o'clock. Please join us. Even if you're driving to Victoria Lake or you're lucky enough to drive to Belyard and you're leaving town, put us on the radio, listen to the sounds. You don't have to just zoom in and we have to see you. We have to know that you're listening. Thank you very much. Daf Yomi is next at 8:30. Yasher Koyach.
Thank you so much. Thank you for including me. It's an honor.